I told you tonight that you're going to have a new sense of appreciation for the power of this object? As a young girl, I never dreamed I would be learning anything about a plow. And I also never thought I would be holding a mini replica of one in front of a live audience. Rather, as a young girl, I dreamed of the woman I would become, and I remember checking off what I thought were powerful positions in the book of memories that my mom gave me. Careers like lawyer and advertising executive were always on my list. Also at the age of about 7, 8, or 9, I remember painting abstract paintings out of like children's watercolor sets, and I was so proud when I would create these beautiful pieces that I thought were called modern art. Some years later, at 16, I landed my first job, my first paid job at the local museum in my hometown. As a summer attendant, I waited sometimes for visitors to come in, and I read Stephen King novels and flipped through this Sears Spring-Summer catalog to determine which bikini I would buy for my very first paycheck. All of these teenage-type goals aside, I remember two things the most. I remember the feeling I had as I walked past the artifacts in the display cases, and I remember the honor that I felt was bestowed on me as I learned how to label artifacts in just the right way, with just the right tools, and in just the right locations. Now, these may seem like random facts about my childhood, but they are all the paths that led me to the place I am today, where I get to push all my passions into my work and my transformative work as a curator. So I'm going to take you tonight on a whirlwind journey through art, using the plow as the subject matter. This is a clay tablet that was created in about 2500 BC. It's from ancient Mesopotamia. In it, you can see there's a lion pulling a plow. And we think that the ancient Mesopotamians were credited for inventing the steam plow. Fast forwarding ahead to the 19th century, artists were finding new modes of creating, many in the styles like Claude Monet and Vincent van Gogh. And this painting here, of course, is by Van Gogh, and it's titled Field with Plowing Farmers. This pastoral scene is very reminiscent of a nostalgic past and a farming pasture land. Even today in galleries and museums, there is a multitude of paintings that are in this very genre and subject matter. Paintings like grain elevators, a cropland far away, and anything to do with the farming community are still being painted and sculpted by contemporary artists. And so what we know about that is that farming technology continued to change, and so did art. This next painting is from the Surrealism era. This painting by Juan Miró was started in 1923. And in it, you see the typical types of figures and images that are reminiscent of the Surrealism style. Although we can discern that this is an agriculture scene because we see a house and there is a plow, there's many bizarre juxtapositions and strange images in this piece. Now, Juan Miró actually grew up in a farming upbringing. And so when he painted this, he really wanted to go back into his roots. After he was finished this painting, he is believed to have said, "I have gone into the absolute of nature." So we know that Miró had a huge heart for this type of lifestyle. And he confessed also about this painting that in this place, he can conceive no wrongdoings of mankind. So as farming technology evolved, so did urban centers sprawled across the globe as well. We know that much is said about the plow and the technology that caused the plow to later become more obsolete as farming practices got bigger and bigger. These new technologies allowed farmers to be able to farm way more land with much less labor. But we don't often hear about what happened to those farm laborers, the ones that were now out of work. We know that they had to leave their home, their rural areas, and take their family into the new cities to find work to support themselves. And so what about when the plow confronts our ideas? What about the times that we're uncomfortable or that we hear things that are not from a European background? This painting is created by William H. Johnson. It is titled Three Great Abolitionists: A. Lincoln, F. Douglass, J. Brown. And of course, we see that those three prominent figures are in the foreground of this painting. But do you see what else is in the back, upper corner of this painting? Anyone? Plow, exactly. So this plow was placed very distinctly and purposefully by the artist because he wanted a recollection to the back-breaking toil of enslaved agricultural workers. Curatorial expert Deborah Reed wrote about the plow in her book, Interpreting Agriculture at Museums. She talked a lot about how it was an iconic image and it just has much nostalgia surrounding the plow. But she says something else too. She says that the plow is just as much can be an instrument that was connected to conflict and violence. The World Health Organization defines violence as physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, against another person, against a whole group or community, that results in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. As the plow was tilling land in our national context, creating these beautiful homesteads and farms for many of our ancestors, others were not so fortunate. Thousands and thousands of indigenous people were displaced off their land, the land that had once provided for their families, a land that was now lost to them. So, as I said, when our beliefs are challenged, it can be pretty tough, and we want to look away. And that might be easier on some subjects than others. But what about when it hits us right in the place where we stand? What about environmental concerns or the climate crisis? Very recently, I had an opportunity to teach a whole group of young kids at the museum, and we were talking about healthy soil. And I took them through an experiment where each group had 3 different kinds of soil. And they poured the same amount of water through each type, and at the end of a measured time, they were supposed to measure the amount of water that had gone through the soil, and technically then measuring what was left, or what was still in the soil. Conclusively, and even though they were very small children, all of the results were the same. The soil that had the healthy, rich ecosystems absorbed much of the water and then held onto it for the very longest. So we know that as a substrate for plants, soil that can absorb water because it's rich in diverse ecosystems is also the soil that is less susceptible to erosion. This painting by Alexander Hogue from 1939 portrays a very powerful image. In it, we can definitely see where the crops are trying to grow, but we also see what has happened because of recurrent plowing. The tractor with the plow sits at the very top of the painting, as if almost to say, I am responsible for this. Perhaps ignorant. The artist has also painted a very stark message in the scarecrow that he has made to look like a crucifix. This message says, there has been sacrifice here. And so, as you leave here today, and as you go into the weeks and months ahead, I want to challenge you to look at art and cultural objects in a new way. This plow may be sitting here tonight neutral on its pedestal, but we know now that it embodies many stories and multiple versions and opposing viewpoints. Museums Galleries, schools, public spaces, and private conversations are all ripe to ask yourself, whose version of the story am I listening to?